Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtrothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's continued coverage of the CSM 16 election. This time with my good friend Uriel. How you doing, Uriel?
I am doing well, and as I said in the stream that broke down before, if you want to know the proper pronunciation for that ridiculously long name that I came up with a decade ago, Uriel Paradisi Ente. It is ridiculous, and you should just call me Uriel because that's a hell of a lot easier.
I'm going to stick with
So
that.
let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you alluded to, there actually was a take one of this attempt that we tried, but thankfully, or you had somehow you managed to have worse gremlins than anyone else that I've interviewed so far. So we had to completely restart from scratch. But here we are. Let's begin by explaining the rules. I have 50 minutes to go over the candidacy with the candidate, and I have their post in front of me, and I can show it to you guys as well. After my opportunity to go over it, I give them 10 minutes, in order to cover anything that I may have missed or to hit any points that they feel are particularly important. And once that is done, and we are both satisfied, it goes over to the YouTubes where it goes into the playlist so you can watch them all to remain informed, because that's the most important thing, an informed electorate, because that is how you get an effective CSM, which is a very powerful tool for all of us players. So with all that in mind, is this your first time running for the CSM? What is your history with the CSM?
So, as I said to you a while back, the CSM, I've tried for this once before, at a much more premature date, I think. This was back in, I think, 2015, I'm pretty sure it was. And I just decided to run saying, hey, I like lore stuff, vote for me. And that's pretty much all I said at that point. It was not a very cogent campaign, really not much of anything, but I feel like it was worth it to try, and understanding the process of things is definitely something that carried forth into this, more modern decision for me to jump back on it. So, it at least helped. So this is my second time through.
So you dabbled with it a few years ago, but this is you would say your first serious, concerted. You really think that you could get it on the CSM run for the CSM? Is that correct?
Yep.
So
That's why I decided to.
what would you say changed? What made this year the year of Uriel?
So, well, I think it's more so the year where the aspects of the community which I'm trying to champion have become way more at the forefront. And those specifically are things to do with the story of the setting of EVE Online. So that whole world, that sort of thing. Specifically because of pretty much what Invasion Chapter 3 brought with it. During that, we saw, it's the Triglavians versus Edencom, and it all seemed very cool and all, and we knew we'd have to fight for things, but absolutely no one, I think, very much knowing this to be the case with CCP, no one anticipated the sheer just magnitude of the people who jumped in on both sides of this conflict, very genuinely on both sides, not just being all right, everyone's going to join the Trigs, we don't have to worry about the Empire side of things. They created Edencom kind of as a puppet faction for presumably fight, so you're not just tanking everything you have with any Empire. If you're playing, making it a thing that people can interact with, but through that you ended up having a lot of people come together very strongly under united banners for each of these factions, and pulling a ridiculous number of people into the conflict and making it a very, very pitched fight on both sides. I don't know if you remember, Raravos, the first system that was taken into final liminality. That was a pretty much just like days straight grind of keeping influence moving toward the side that the side of the Trigs, but it was being very, very much counteracted by the Edencom side the entire time. So, and this is pretty much how it went in every liminal system. You had these enormous groups just absolutely struggling against each other to make it happen. And I say the liminal ones because the Edencom fortresses are neat and all, but basically the attraction on the Trig side of things came with the fact that when security state is dropped, everyone, it's suddenly a huge PvEVP free for all, which you mentioned earlier in your last interview with the guy before me, where it's a huge combination of people doing PvE stuff, but also going around shooting each other in these huge fleets, these absolutely massive, extremely fun conflicts. And all of those certainly came to a head with Nyarja, where it was just a ridiculous number of things happening at once. And again, it's PvE and PvP, and these are all integrated and given context extremely well through the sort of, again, the banners that people decided to fly under, organized essentially as a role play kind of thing initially. And they just sort of completely built out from there. And it really served as, I think, a springboard for a lot of people to really just get heavily into what was going on. And not just in a, all right, I'm in a spaceship shooting another spaceship kind of way. It's, we're shooting the Triglavian collective. They're invading from this mysterious area of space, abyssal dead space. They were there for thousands of years. We know they know something about the drifters and they're really pissed at them, and they're coming out here because the drifters are coming after them, and the empires don't want them to take their space, and they want something to do with the stars. They're trying to extract stuff from them, and the empires are working together a bit under Edencom, but even there, you have like, oh, the Minmatar specifically, most of all, saying, it's what if this is sort of just a big conspiracy for the Amar to get more power, which is a valid thing to say too. And these are all discussions that have been had. Uh, and a lot of it's happened outside of the traditional RP circles as well. You've had people sincerely interested in the setting context of what's been happening in the game. And this makes it not a thing where you have, all right, people playing the game and then also the story stuff exists if you want to go find that somewhere. No, they're profoundly well integrated in that expansion. And it's, I think, shown a lot of people the potential of things to really just the potential of story elements to really elevate the content of the game itself and the degree to which players will be passionate about something they're doing. Like another example, look at what happened with the Equilibrium of Mankind leading up to the last event. They could have just dropped new event sites and saying, "All right, the Equilibrium of Mankind is doing stuff now." But what they did before that is they got a bunch of dev actors over the course of an entire week or two, bringing out actual player controlled. I say player, but it's developers controlling these ships as playing characters, like in high sec and stuff, culminating with an Equilibrium of Mankind Titan appearing, and it's doomsdaying a planet, and you have tons of people coming into the game shooting this thing, and you have developer characters talking in local as these characters they're playing as. The guy in the Titan was a guy who's been, you know, extremely major in pretty much the story of things for the whole, very much the Amar side of things, faction warfare, pretty much all the story that's been happening majorly for them in the past couple of years. This guy came in and, it just provides this enormous, great, just attractor for people. And then the event drops and everyone's like, all right, this is the Equilibrium of Mankind. We already know a bit about them now because we've had all this happening. They suck. They're, trying to kill everybody. That's their thing. It's like people already had the discussion about it and they know a bit more about it already and you have some context and it's all right, we're going after their capital shipyards and stuff. And it again enriches the content. Story
Right.
shouldn't only exist for the purpose of making content palatable. Uh, Genuinely, they can just elevate each other very well. And I think in very recent times, Eve has been doing a phenomenal job of actually making that a thing. And my desire really is to just continue that line of thought and just keep that in people's minds and make sure that those are things that are considered going forward, especially in terms of, potentially being on the CSM. In that place, that's a place where I can at least try to keep that a consideration. In a place where the majority of things are, as it goes, mostly just no block candidates who are mass voted in because that's, huge areas of the game. These are the most concerted, concentrated groups, and that's just how the CSM happens. But having representation of a aspect of the game that isn't just all of the big nullsec group experiences, I think is a very valuable thing. Just as much as nullsec is valuable. You have lowsec, you have wormholes, you have now Poshvin also with a number of people running for that, including Aldavius, who I love that guy. He knows a lot about what he's talking about, and I've been talking to him pretty much the whole time this stuff has been happening. He's someone who knows about the area of the game he is interested in and is involved in, and really wants to make sure that not only balance but potential changes, balance passes, uh, additions are all able to be integrated properly into what's there and actually make it properly done. And that's again the guiding role of the CSM. CSM doesn't make decisions; they don't do anything. It's a group where, CCP gets together with everyone and they bring up ideas and things that they're working on and they get feedback. And that's what the CSM does. It gives them feedback. Giving feedbacks from different angles is the value of it. And that's where you have to have other things happening. And that's sort of what I'm trying to go in for this with, because really this is a element of the game that provides a lot for it that I think has really just gone under the radar for the longest time simply because it hasn't been in the spotlight. Uh,
Right.
but story stuff, it provides context. Like I said, it enriches things, but it also adds a hook for people for a game, for a any sort of IP. If you're invested in the setting of it, in the story of it, in what's happening within it, you'll sometimes find yourself curious about what's going on with it long, long after you may have not been doing it for a while, or early on. If again in a game like Eve Online, Eve is a game where the people you fly with kind of end up making it worth it. If you jump into the game for a few days and you do the tutorial, you do some career agents, you have no idea what you're doing outside of that, you haven't found your place yet. You need time to find your place in the game.
Right.
And, everyone finds it at different paces. But Eve's biggest problem, I think everyone talks about this all the time, is new player retention. And one major benefit of stuff with story is being able to provide just that, a hook for people to get attached to and see that and be interested in it and perhaps stick around a little while longer. And the value for that for a newer player, at least a younger player base, anyone who's trying to join the game, is invaluable, I think. And that doesn't only stop there; it extends to older players as well, where you have someone say, "All right, here's a big story thing. Oh, the Amar Empress died. The Drifters came in and attacked her. They blew her up. She's dead. Things are happening. The world is changing."
Sorry.
Someone who hasn't played in a while could, hear that and say, "Damn, that's actually really wild. I'm gonna log on for the first time in forever." And again, that can happen just the same as with, say, actual player politics and stuff too.
Right.
But the more things that exist within the game and within what's thrown out there for people to potentially say, "All right, now I want to know what's happening again," the better. And story, along with all the other things I've mentioned so far, provides a hook for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I certainly agree with you on the purpose of lore, or the value of lore. In fact, I think I even have a video that's literally named that from back in the day, where I talk about a lot of these same concepts about how lore allows people to be invested and rewarded for that investment. Excuse me. I've got every technical detail today, physical and digital. Anyway, so but the key pieces that's missing here that I think that's important to go over is, one, CCP has a pretty significant follow through issue. The shorthand that I've used is what I call the Edencom problem, which you
Oh yes,
talked about, where Edencom was more of an oversight, or not an oversight, but basically
an
Edencom existed.
unanticipated thing to have become as big as it did.
More or less, Edencom as a faction existed because they didn't want you to tank your standings with the actual empires, and so there needed to be some sort of stand-in for the empires that would be the halfway point in between, and thus Edencom was born, and kind of everything stems from that. But the problem is that the people that invested in that feel absolutely cheated, and probably rightfully so. And the problem is that, as brilliant as Invasions was, this has tainted everything. And this isn't the first time this has happened. And in fact, this isn't even the first time it's happened to that community, which means that that CCP is damaging their relationships and damaging the faith in the very people that are like the most powerful, important people when it comes to like the passion of the game and making these systems,
And getting
yeah,
people excited about these things.
and making people
It's pretty much
understand
free
these games.
marketing when people, yeah, it's pretty much free marketing when people get really into these things and they start to talk about it a lot and get passionate about it. And that
And
provides a lot of value for a game that, needs players to still want to be playing it,
right.
you know?
And as of right now, I don't see CCP getting much better at that. And so, yeah, absolutely. We need CSM in there that can help us, because the problem is that this is, when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, you're asking players to invest. This is going to be true in faction warfare. This is true anywhere in which, the empires, like, historically, CCP has avoided giving us goals. And I've actually talked to CCP about this before. Like, even in event sites don't really tell you what you're doing or why, because, like, you're supposed to be able to fill in your own stuff, and they don't want to tell you like what side you're on because, like, for instance, in the Sancha incursions, you know, everybody wanted, or not everybody, there were people that wanted to be part of Sancha, and so like they don't know,
Mhm.
they don't want to tell you what side you're on because you might be on the other side, and so you might do it a different way, and it's emergent gameplay. But the issue is that when you don't tell anyone anything, then no one knows what the hell to do, and so it kind of falls
Yeah,
apart.
it's been the lack of expanding the information on things that have happened, I think, is honestly probably more a symptom of the processes CCP goes through and the idea that it's probably genuinely very hard to get things approved to be sent out there. Even stuff like the world news we've heard people talk before is it's not just as simple as writing it and pushing it out. There's like a process of approval, all sorts of things like that. And so far as my best guess is anything that has to do with story would have to end up going through the lead narrative designer for the game. And
Right.
priority is not given to things that are like that if they're pitted up against, all right, we have upcoming features we are working on, things we are planning for, and things that there's a lot of stuff that gets left behind just again as a symptom of forward game development. There isn't enough development bandwidth to, really do all of these things. And it's a shame, genuinely, because these are things that again drum up interest and keep people invested. You see someone, they drop a new world news article and everyone's talking about it for a couple of days with all the little headlines, things like that. Just providing again that context and information for things that are actively happening is extremely valuable. And again, that's the sort of thing where perhaps not everyone, working at CCP keeps, has that in mind. I mean, especially when it comes to the invasion stuff. Um, a lot of that felt as if, and it's not at all really a stretch to say, some of it likely got rushed out. They did not have enough time to do everything they wanted because they were slave to two deadlines and things. And that, of course, wouldn't just go for game mechanics. It would go for the entire development of things, story elements, anything. And I think that's probably kind of just what's happened here. But again, if we have someone on the CSM who can say, all right, this was a thing that worked and this got a ridiculous amount of passion for the game, just actively making things happen. Keep that in mind, perhaps, going forward with certain other features. And just having someone who can say that, I think, is a valuable thing. And that doesn't, and in any case, even need to be me. But that's just, a big part of my platform. And that's at least a thing that I would constantly be hoping to throw forward in discussions about things, or at least in the context of, all right, we're developing a new thing. How's this going to work? And having someone who can say, all right, well, yeah, cool, and perhaps throw out something like, all right, this is how this could work inside the world of Eve, Like
Well,
making there be context integrates the idea of the story with the active gameplay. And Eve is actually quite good for that already. Pretty much everything you can encounter in the game, everything you do, everything you literally are, is explained in a very coherent story way. Like, for anyone who might not know all of this stuff off the top of their head, you play as a capsuleer. You're a person who you're a clone. You have a clone and you fly in a pod, which is connected to your ship. You're inside the pod. You're connected through the pod to your ship, and you can control the whole thing through there because it's literally interfacing with you. You kind of become the ship. There's a whole chronicle about that, the Jovian Wet Grave, which is fantastic and just goes into really what the pod is. And you have that. You have the fact that there's cloning technology. When the pod gets blown up, there is a thing that happens, in a absolutely minuscule fraction of a second, where the whole quantum state of your brain is just kind of flat. It's kind of recorded, and they place, they kind of etch that into a new clone, and you're another player.
right.
And that's how that is. It's not just, oh, you respawn.
I
In so many other games, it's just you can say, oh yeah, you respawned now, and that's it. There's no depth. There's no, all right, this is why it happens. Having
Sure.
stuff like that for a game is a good thing. And Eve, from the very beginning, starts with that. So going forward, having features have, anything you show info on, you can see something about and learn something about and get another little detail about the world in which you're playing. And there's
Right.
value in that, like I said, in making people kind of think about things and be attached to the world that they are in. Like I mentioned this at an earlier time, but agency boosters, say for one, back when they were first introduced, getting dropped in the agency related sites, back when there was more just, sites and then it recorded points and stuff, and you didn't really get much in the ways of, you know, a bunch of different login rewards, things like that. Initially, those boosters all just had a description that said, "Oh, agency booster 1 or 2 or 3," and that's all that was in there. And so, something I went and did was, all right, and this is a thing that you can consider for any feature of a game. Give it some context. All right, this comes from the agency site NPCs. Any NPC in any agency site has ended up dropping these things. Why are they there? And you can honestly just come up with something to create context for it and make players have, all right, that makes sense, instead of just saying, why would this come from here? With the agency stuff, I went and on the forums wrote a thing where I was like, all right, here's an idea for it. The agency comes down and say marks these sites for capsuleers to come fight. And they drop these boosters as an incentive for pilots to come out here and say, all right, we're going to fight stuff and we're going to get loot. And then these NPCs who are within the world of Eve, real people and stuff, they know they know what's going to happen when capsuleers show up. So they have these boosters and stuff that are dropped as well, and they pick them up and why not, let's use them if we're going to end up having to fight these capsuleers anyhow. And just that alone, you have a short description there, gives context. And what happened there was the developers saw that and you were like, yeah, they were this actually kind of works, we're going to use this as a bit of inspiration. And they added something to the game there. If you read the descriptions for the agency boosters, that's what came from that. And it provides something, it gives you context, it makes the world a little more alive. Every little thing in the game has something like that. And being able to, again, in the role of CSM, kind of keep that sort of thing in mind in developing things, and not try to steer things because of, all right, how would it work in the world, but more of, all right, here's this game feature, this is what we want to do with it, this is this new thing. And then it provides a space where you can say, all right, cool, this could work in the world because this is how it could work, or this is how it could work.
Right.
And this is how players could be introduced to it better, or attached to it, and this is how
Would
you could connect it back to things that already exist in the world
would
and
you
not
say
make it
that
some jarring change to things.
would you say that there's been a problem with this recently? Because I feel like a lot of the stuff that's come out has been pretty good examples of this.
I'd say the past, okay, Invasion, all of Invasion, I think, began to do a good job of this. Chapter 2, where you started to have the flashpoints and stuff, and honestly, pretty much all of the Triglavian content has been, I think, a very well done work in this way.
Right.
But the thing with Eve is that there are different teams developing different things at every moment. Not every team has these thoughts and ideas really in mind or in their process, like,
That's
at
fair.
all. It's just the nature of how things go. You had CCP Sledgehammer and oh goodness, what was his name? I forgot his dev name. The guys who worked on Invasion, they kept a good number of these things in mind, and it became much more of a thing in mind leading into Chapter 3. And then Chapter 3 was just saying absolutely no one expected the enormous response to.
Right. But
And that's a thing that, again, needs to be, I think, kept up as a topic, saying, hey, if you have this sort of thing happening here, be not only wary, but perhaps take advantage of the fact that you can have a lot of people throwing themselves into it. And I think, honestly, CCP has kind of fumbled this in that they kind of pretty much just dropped everything for months and months. So, all the people who did these things is like, what's it going to lead to? Well, now there's Poshfen, and it's cool. But having it almost sounds greedy in a way to say it, and this isn't the way I'm meaning for it to come off. There needs to be, without there being some element of what can be thought of or felt as payoff for that sort of thing, in the future, I see less players being willing to throw themselves back into it like that. And it's in my thoughts of things, I feel as if CCP came into this, and then the management of things sees it and is all right, this was cool for this. Now let's move on to something new because we're going to keep
right.
developing features because we're a game company. That's just, yeah, that's the nature of game development. But the losses, I think, to any future implementations of this type of integrated content may suffer for the fact that they kind of dropped it in the first place, even if they're working on other things that obviously take priority. It's a sort of thing that needs, I think, to be kept in mind, and it's
I'm,
important to keep it a topic of discussion.
I'm
And again,
worried that they're
CSM
playing
can't
with
decide anything,
right.
but it can you can say stuff. It's a feedback group, and being able to keep it in mind, I think, is valuable.
I'm concerned that CCP is playing with fire because historically they have like I said not provided too much in the terms of like artificial motivation outside of things like maybe missions or whatever. And, we even had people in the chat saying that it's a sandbox, and it is a sandbox, but that's the thing. These NPC actors are entities within the universe, and therefore as a piece of the sandbox, we can interact with them by deciding what our relationship with these different things are. But in order to be able to do that, they have to have sides and they have to have agendas that you can either help or disrupt, right? One of the
Yeah, and if it's
reasons.
content, especially like anything relating to NPCs as a group, you have incursions, you have faction warfare, you have invasions, you had the Drifter incursions even for, a couple of weeks, which were pretty much a test bed for kind of what ended up, evolving into what we have with invasions where NPCs were fighting each other. It was terribly broken at the time, but all that, it was all not only extremely profitable because of how broken it was, but each of these different features I'm talking about, they provide something for players on either side of things, especially in the case of invasion, to say, all right, this is what I'm attaching to as kind of my cause instead of, oh, hey, spaceship, pew pew.
Right.
It
So,
gives it more lasting impact and emotional kind of potential for attachment. And
right.
again, that keeps people coming back, keeps people playing. And that's the
Exactly.
value of the story, I think. And I've been talking a lot about the value of, story in terms of gameplay specifically so far, but there's a lot more I also could go into. So we can keep going over this stuff for now and then I can also hop on that.
Well, I wanted to really talk about the fact that my concern is that, like I said, they're playing with fire. If the thing about incursions is that you're doing it for money, right?
Hmm.
Drifter invasions, you're doing it for money. Faction warfare was the one place really where you are actually forwarding the agenda of one of these groups in a
Prior
very
to
real way.
invasions, of course. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, that's my point. And
And that's the
then
attraction of exactly. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think that that's one of the real big things about invasions was that we've asked for this for a long time. You've asked for the ability to step into one of these empires and either work for or against them in a tangible and noticeable way, because we want to have interests that we can either fulfill or stop, and therefore giving us
Exactly.
that is awesome. But here's the problem, here's the fire of that.
Hmm.
If you fail to follow through with that, there's a promise in that, right? There's a promise in that you're building a relationship. There's a promise that this is going to be something. This is going to mean something, and and uh, that you will be somehow like it'll maybe not recognized insofar as like getting your name in a
Yeah,
chronicle or
no,
something
yeah.
like that. But my point is
But it
that
being
like
something that affects the world and then has something leading forward from it instead of just stopping abruptly and never having anything else happen from it again.
right.
Yeah.
And so it isn't just a matter of needing to create new content for Edencom. If you don't even come
Yeah,
out
not
with a
that at all.
video
Yeah.
from Kashia Valkanir, then those people not only feel left out, but they literally feel slighted, cheated, thrown away, disregarded by the very people you asked them to care and then didn't care about the fact that they cared.
Pretty
And that
much. I think a
hurts
lot of
people.
the way especially a lot of the way that the Invasion Chapter 3 stuff was marketed was pick your side, do these things, you know. And again, CCP just absolutely did not anticipate the scale of the engagement that they would actually make happen by doing that.
But they also,
And
it's now 6 months,
again, sort
what,
of,
eight
and it,
months?
yeah,
They haven't adjusted
it's
either.
been a while. Although, however, looking at the current quadrant, I can see there being a good reason internally for things to have not been, evolving over time here. If they're working on things related to, again, the world of the game, which is what this entire next upcoming quadrant is about, which makes me very happy personally. If they're doing that, I can see that as being part of the reason why they haven't had time to dedicate, because they have so okay, they have CCP Delegate Zero, the narrative director for the game. I think that's his title. And then you have one other narrative designer who they hired in the last couple of years. And I'm sure there are other content writers and that sort of thing. But whatever they're working on, they don't have huge teams for this.
Right.
So I could see that as being this lack of things that have come out of the invasion aftermath as sort of being a symptom of them obviously being working on future things. And that a lot of that again just comes down to like the game development cycle and development bandwidth and what they perceive as what needs things the most right now. And the fact that the enormous engagement inspired by the, again, story related elements attached to the invasion storyline, uh, the fact that all of that kind of seemed to definitely beforehand have been underestimated badly. Uh, if that's still kind of something where they said, all right, that was cool, and let's do something else now, instead of taking that sort of thing in stride and saying, all right, what can we do better with this? And then combining that with the sort of perceived, at least, failure to follow through on some things in terms of the just stopping of world news for like months on end, blah blah blah, while they were obviously working on other stuff. It it can make some of that fire that was kindled up by that sort of thing die out, even if it was wonderful what was happening. Moving a bit out of that though, invasion stuff, the way that worked, the game mechanics, the way it was attached to things, it's kind of a throwaway point here, but
Okay,
implementing some of those functions into, say, some complete revamp of faction warfare, where you have both sides being able to fight a system, uh, fight for a system, that sort of thing. I think that would have a lot of value there as well. There's
I
places in
agree.
which the stuff developed for Invasion could really enrich the way people play the game and the way they experience its world.
I agree, but my point is that if we continue to have a lukewarm reaction, don't you feel like that could potentially be, or like a lukewarm, uh, half committed like aspect to this? Don't you feel like that could just continue to do more damage ultimately? Like I,
It's
on the
like
one hand, I want
it's
them
like
to,
the idea the perception of them teasing something and not actually doing it in the end, I think does hurt that aspect of things where maybe someone will get super interested in this and really passionate about it the first time through, but then the next time something happens, they might not expect it to work out the same way because of their prior experience. And yeah, that sort of thing, like you're saying, can and I think does absolutely harm potential future engagement with things that are done in a similar way,
I
which is
just
risky.
I'm bringing this up because what I would expect in out of a lore focused CSM representative is to make sure that CCP help them understand this, because I'm not sure if they've learned their lesson. I don't think that they've learned what's going on, because I still think that that older thinking, that that it is about like the player stuff and not about having a rich universe. Like if you half-ass that, then people are going to be broken by that, and that
I
is
think so.
not
Yeah.
great. And so I need a
It's a thing that
CSM
I think has
guy that's there and says, this is all well and good, guys, but there will be people invested in this, and so you better have an idea about what to do with those people that invest in this, because if you're not prepared, they're going to be pissed, and there's nothing
yeah.
anybody else can do about that at that point.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm hoping to be able to keep up as a topic of at least acknowledgement in the case that I get onto the CSM, because that's a very big thing.
Right. So that was something that I really wanted to drive home about, because I know that you are very passionate about making sure that the like the descriptions and the context is there, which is very very good, and is a major use to that, because you can also help bring while you're not replacing Delegate Zero, he does a good enough job as it is, but you can
Yeah,
help
that wouldn't
massage the
at all be my role
conversations,
in. Yeah,
because he's not
exactly. That would
in those other conversations.
Yeah, in no way exactly would any
Right.
CSM have any sort of role similar to that at all. But making it a topic that's perhaps kept in the minds of some of the other CSM or some of the developers speaking with the CSM and that sort of thing, keeping it present as even the smallest bit of a consideration, I think, holds enormous value in potentially, making that sort of content be a successful thing in the future.
And
So, yeah,
more importantly, those very null block candidates, and even some of the other non null block candidates, will often come from a position that lore and the universe is not that important, and therefore, you know, and not only not that important, but maybe even a waste of time. And I think that this
I
is
have
actually part of the
absolutely
problem.
seen that perspective before. Yeah,
Right.
see, I think that's part of the kind of endemic kinda thing in games where the player against player stuff, especially in any game where you have multiple people, all in one place doing something, being able to fight one another. Uh, the very raw, real interactions tend to, for very many people, become the most present and potent bit of emotional stuff that attaches them to things. And the story for things can sometimes drop away to being something secondary for people. But again, having something that's there at all for someone to be attached to outside of when they're not able to do these fighting and shooting and doing all of that, enriching the world of a game, giving there more to do in this world and more to keep in your mind than the pew pew of things, it gives again more of a hook for things. And yeah, as someone in chat just said, CCP has said a lot that the story of Eve is its players. Yeah, that's absolutely been, I think, a big part of the like internal fuel as well. That sort of intentionally or not forces people away from the mindset that maybe the story of things or the context of things or the world itself can be at all a rich thing and a genuine part of the game. A lot of people, I think, and including CCP, a lot of them seem to see PvE, sure, you can say that sort of thing, story stuff, context things, integrating things like that as superfluous almost, and more of a secondary consideration where the big player fights are the biggest thing, and by far that's the thing they market things the most off of, these many thousands of person fights. And I think that mindset actually is a bit of a problem insofar as bringing new players specifically into the game. Someone sees these advertisements, oh, thousands of people fighting in these systems. They hope to jump in and be able to find these things. Some of them may be able to do that. But when players realize that what they've been advertised, they aren't going to be able to do often or perhaps at all for weeks, months, longer in some cases, are they going to stick around if that's all they've heard of the game and that's what they hopped in to try to find?
I
You
want
need to advertise and have be there, or at least exposed to players more aspects of the game than just that thing, you know? And that's again where the value of a story comes in. You see, things like Overwatch and you have like Apex now, where they have these again cinematics and that sort of thing. And Eve doesn't necessarily even need stuff like that, but providing stuff for them to look at and say, "Wow, that's cool." And have that be a thing that provides context and enrichment for the world instead of having to go into a game and say, "All right, oh, I can't actually find any of this. This isn't a thing. I can't do any of this right now because I have to wait to train up my skills and join a big group. I can't do the 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 man fights till then." Having it be something that they can immediately be attached to and meld with their actual experience in the game. Like I said, like stuff with the lore, like the pod, that's what you are. You read about the empires, you read about what each of these ships are, their history, in their show info, or God forbid a player is able to discover the fiction site. This is actually, I think, one of my largest gripes and a thing that I talk about a lot, kind of relentlessly, is that there is no exposure for a new player to find this stuff in the first place, usually. On the main EVE Online website, there is no link to the fiction portal.
yeah,
Nothing goes to it.
they come to the easy
And
assumption that there isn't a resource at all.
uh-huh. And that's very sadly been a thing I've seen with a lot of newer players I've interacted with. They find out about something with the story and they say, "I had no idea any of this even existed. Like, where can I even find this stuff?" And you link them to Fiction Portal, and then they can finally perhaps start to dive into things a little. But it doesn't get linked on the main page of the website for the game itself. None of it is referred to in the game client. There's nothing that goes from the game client to an external source with all this information. And even within the game, I have said that you can fly around and, look at things and find things and discover things and perhaps get a little information for things yourself. But within the game itself, there's no way for you to actually really dig into the information of things. And even something as simple as providing a way for them to see something and find some more information about it by perhaps linking to the actual official fiction portal from within the actual game client. Just something as small as that, having it in the client, linked there, and having it linked from the actual page of the website would go a huge way in exposing players to something that could, again, potentially keep them around. And once you're in this game, you have something that's keeping you around, you can find your place in it. You might not want to just always be looking at story stuff. That's That's certainly what I did, but many other people, most other people probably don't do that, but maybe it'll still be in the back of their mind when they're going and doing other things. You go into the game, you find your place, you do things, you stick around, you find this extremely rich just world literally built by its players. And just being able to have something to make you want to stick around long enough to discover all that and find your place in it is enormously important. And that's the value of that, I think.
Well, I want to jump in on the idea of like the story and player stories versus NPC stories, because part of the problem is the perception that the
That they're
story
separate.
is this plot that you get, and that isn't the point. The issue here is actually that we want to be able to tell stories, and we want to be able to write stories, and we want to be able to live in a sandbox. But the problem is that when a sandbox is just sand, then you can just build castles, and that's cool, but like that makes the only
But then that's
objective
all.
your name, like your
Just build
name
a
on the
castle.
sov map, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But there are other objectives and there are other things to want to do, and so
And
some people
for a very large part, most people aren't going to be doing that. So if that's
were
the only thing
well,
that's kind of being advertised as the goal of the game,
but
then you're gonna have a lot of people who come into it and never do it,
the
you know?
point is that we're talking about a sandbox, and a sandbox means options, and so giving
Yes.
people factions to choose to align with or against is
And
part of
attach themselves
having a
to.
good sandbox. Those are the
Exactly.
catalysts
I mean,
for
just
conflict.
look at World of Warcraft with its different factions. I mean, that's an active part of, the game, how people
Right.
play it.
But Eve is very different than that, because a good example of this is Flossiswin. When we don't talk about the story and
Yeah,
how
plots, uh-huh.
player story and an NPC story can mix, Flossiswin like basically started as a response to player action. Then there were NPC actions that players didn't have to take on the call of the NPC, but some did.
They
Loyalists
did. Mhm.
did for no other reason but Sorum asked them to, and that
Yeah,
pushed the
you had
conflict
then
into another level.
CCP put, CCP's dropping literal tons of NPC dreadnoughts on places in HiSec and this one other thing as well, like, things like that,
Right. And so this whole
where
thing
it's
spins
it's
into this
not only, alright, yeah, it's a world that reacts to the actions its players take.
right.
That is a really important thing. It's,
So,
like, say back to that, like, old, the Prophecy trailer, which was, cool in concept. But, say imagining, a player group doing something, perhaps building towards what CCP is implementing as a new feature, and having the in-game empires actually care about these things, and send out some ships or something, and have that actually be a part of the story again of the world itself. Where this is, say some faction doesn't want this thing that this player group is doing to happen, and you don't just go out and like face stomp them. But you create some context and perhaps a little content for players. And that sort of thing exactly is like it integrates player actions with a ever evolving world. And an MMO is really absolutely wonderful for that because it's a thing that's able to constantly be iterated on. And again, iteration is historically a thing that CCP has had
but
some
and
seeming trouble with, but
right. And but that goes back to my problem, and why this is really important is that the the issue that I have is I still feel that CCP is seeing this as like a design of a new feature with a hook. And then the players engage with it and they see it as a relationship. And then when
exactly.
CCP moves on, then that
Those players
relationship
are
is violated. And that's why
yeah,
you have a big problem.
players who perhaps saying falsely attach themselves to something thinking that it's the main point of things. There needs to be concessions for, again, the large tracts of the player base that have ended up being involved with things specifically for those reasons.
And CCP's been pretty good
Yeah,
at improvising in the past, and
they
whatnot.
have,
But
and they've sincerely improved, I think, in past times as well. Again, everything with the invasions as it was ongoing, extremely well. Like it made things feel connected, alive. The actions of the players were mattering because hey, you're actually fighting for what will be changes to the game's map itself. I mean, and that just you combine that with the story of why it's happening, and you just create this landscape where the players are coming into this, understanding these factions, knowing what they're trying to do, and picking their side based on that. The empires keep things the way they are. the Triglavians are trying to take our stuff. And then there's the Triglavians who are taking these entire systems, just absolutely changing them, say, breaking points of contact off in the map. Niarja was insane because of that. Everyone anticipated that from day one. And what's even better is for something like that, another thing where story helped to elevate it and make it be as major of a thing and an expectation as it was the story stuff where the Triglavians were specifically going after blue stars as well as one type of yellow star. So from day one, people knew that Niarja was a potential target here and a very likely one, given, that CCP would obviously want to make some very fun things happen. And when it happened, everybody poured into there. Everyone dropped what they were doing. And I say everyone, I pretty much mean everyone. Like, a ridiculous number of people got into there. You had people from all these different nullsec groups also coming in there, and they were in a lot of the other liminal systems. But Niarja was just something special. You had Villy say his bit about, protecting the little guy, and then Mittens came out and was like, "We're gonna help take the system for the Trigs now," kind of because
Right.
of that sort of thing being said, and things just it just escalates, and there's the player politics of it, and people wanting to go against someone else that they don't like so much, maybe what they're doing, and attaching themselves to a faction and what's happening there and what's being actively
Right.
affected in
But
the future of the game. And this is
right.
where all of this comes together. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but as a CSM, here's a good idea. Like, let's do a thought experiment. Let's pretend like you were
Okay.
already on the CSM this last year, right? During Invasions. The Invasions was really great. It captured the imagination in a way that it never could before. At what point within Invasions would you have most wanted to have been on the CSM, and what would you have tried to do to help what was happening? Because there were some good steps and there were some missteps. At what point would you have, like, were you like, man, like if you could go back and like teleport and be CSM for a day during that time, what would it be?
What would it be? Honestly, it'd probably be more of a forewarning to them before chapter 3 of the amount of interaction that they should maybe expect with it. Because with that,
No,
remember
I'm
you
not talking
had,
about like being prophetic. What I'm saying, like in the moment, like maybe
oh, in
step
the
in and
moment.
help them
Okay.
understand, like getting on the phone horn as a CSM and like stepping in as a CSM during this time. We didn't have a CSM person in that kind of role. You weren't on the CSM this year, Uriel. It hurt us. When would you have wanted to have been there, and what would you have done?
Hmm. So you're speaking about like during chapter 3 of Invasions,
Just
mostly?
during the last year. So yeah, end of chapter
Last
2,
year.
beginning
All
of
right.
chapter
Yeah.
3, or
Yeah.
chapter
Chapter
3.
2, beginning of chapter 3, that sort of thing. Honestly, all I really would have tried to provide input on was the idea that these things happening aren't a thing to just finish and be done with because of the, like we were saying earlier, the level to which you had a lot of people becoming very hooked on to these things. And it's not just something that when the event is over, it's done. You have this expectation that it has a lasting, ongoing kind of flow to it. And that doesn't have to be something you solve like, yeah, like Sancha,
But but
like with
how?
incursions and
You're
stuff.
but how? You're
Oh,
not. You
okay.
can't. You don't
Well,
have
what's the okay,
extra
yeah, I have
design
to
or
present
development
solutions here.
effort.
Here
You
you
don't.
go.
No. You don't have development effort. Like you don't have design effort. You don't get to make any
Nope.
big changes. But like, what is there anything
But what do you want
can we
to say?
do to help make this last? What could we have done? Little things to have made this whole thing better. How
Little
could
things
we
that
have
we could
felt?
have done to have made this whole
How
thing
could we
better.
have made Edencom? How could we have wrapped that up in a way better than we did, given that you can't like introduce new sites or new mechanics or new something as a way of doing so?
Just and again, I think this is something that's probably been affected by things they're planning to do in the future. Just having there be any sort of content on that side in the vein, kind of like the Trigs. You could say have a video or something. They had one of those, I think, in one of the the scope videos, and you have basically you had this constant flow of news articles that when Invasion Chapter 3 was done, they stopped. It was just done. You had one like multiple a week sometimes for months, and then nothing for 3 or so months, pretty much. And that just staggering, just drop off entirely. You don't even need to do much. Just having even any slow little trickle of things would have helped to sate that sort of belief on the player's part that there was something more to this and that it would continue in some ways, you know? I think that's the biggest thing. I
All right.
can't speak so much to the actual game design and the features that were actively happening because honestly, in my opinion, they were pretty well done. I think, if you wanna have anything be sorry about my birds screaming in the background, that's what you're hearing.
It's all
She
right.
sees the dog probably.
Which actually, that I think is a good segue into. I'm running low on my 50 minutes, so I do want to chime in with a question because I feel like if I go through this entire interview and don't address the bear in the room, that people will get mad at me. So you want to explain what the deal with the bears are?
Oh, the bears, yeah.
Yeah, it
So
was
that is
it was definitely noticed during your CCP interview.
Oh, yes, it is the Winnie the Pooh wall. They are my girlfriends, and I love them, and they just kinda sit there, and it's a great
Okay,
it's just a great thing. I love them.
fair
It's
enough.
a
Okay,
really
good.
it's a good, some
Yeah,
people collect all sorts of different things, and this is one of them, and it's great. And I like keeping it on the camera.
excellent. Okay, well, this is about. We'll call this the 10-minute warning. Is there anything else? We pretty much have been hitting this one kind of note. Is there anything else that you want to stretch into before we wrap things up?
I think I've mostly hit on most of my major points. Um, but if I had anything else to just sort of dive into a little here, again, and this is going back to really just the roots of everything with story stuff. The way things were handled or have been handled with the Triglavian Collective and all of their story has been very odd. Basically, they were fed to us as a sort of big mystery, and that worked for a very long time, during the time which we didn't know everything about them. But then over the course of invasion, you have them, actively being in our space. They're doing things on a planet. We're told, oh, they're doing things on the planets. They're bioadapting people. They are walking around. You have, actual Triglavians walking around. But to this day, you don't know what any of this stuff is. We know, oh, they did something, but they don't say how that worked on the planets or anything about, say, we have people living in Triglavian space now. We have the Triglavians living in these in stations, doing things there, being there, and in canon interacting with people. And despite all of this stuff that's happened, not one sentence of information has been put together regarding who they are, like within the context of what we would reasonably know in the game at this point. And this, just as with Edencom, it's like that sort of drop off completely where things just weren't being said. The Triglavians just there's no provided depth for their like people, their society, their civilization. With any of the empires, you have, all this information about who they are, what their people are, how they do things, like what they do. And these are all things that are from, being someone living in the world, something that people would know. And there are things like that any reasonable person living in the world of Eve, say if you were a person there, you would know by now about Triglavian society. But none of that's been provided. And I
Would you?
think that gets back to a bit, I think, of perhaps the little bit of an endemic issue of stories sometimes being used only as a hook and sort of being dropped when it's, seen to have served its purpose, you know? And I
Right.
fear that a little bit in the context of the Trigs.
Would you say that exploration and learning about the lore of EVE Online is more rewarding or more frustrating?
I'd say, well, if you aren't trying to do it from inside the game client, then I think it can be extremely rewarding, especially if you find anyone else to talk to about it. You have a whole community of people who, and it's not like you have to find the community. Talk around a little bit, and you'll have a bunch of people who point you in different ways. You can look around on the internet
I
on
ain't saying it's not
the fiction
rewarding.
portal. Yeah, yeah. What I mean to say is, it is rewarding. You can find something you're interested in, and try to look up something about it. And Eve's lore has been being developed since before the game was released, upwards of 20 years of different authors writing different things and having these things be built. It is a very fulfilling experience to discover these things and find them and learn about them because almost everything you look into, there's more to look into. It doesn't just stop at one surface level sentence, there's a whole context behind it. And it really rewards being interested because when you're looking, you'll find more. And there's just so much of it at this point that you're not just going to find something and get to the bottom and just be done. There's just a million other things you can also look into. And that's what it is. It's very like I said, fulfilling. It could probably be a little frustrating at times, but I'd say the majority of the frustration would be trying to find where to start looking. Once you know where to start looking, in, whether that be the fiction portal or some other place, that's where things start. That's where you can start finding what you want to do. There's a couple of comments in the chat I'd also like to talk about a bit.
What just happened? Hold up. What just happened? Come on, really? Hold up.
I think.
Okay, cool.
If
I'm
we
here.
have the time. The stream is still going. I don't know if
Yeah. No. My computer just decided to have a good
for
time.
a moment.
All right. So, yeah, we can get to a couple of those questions in just a second, but I want to. Sure, go for it. Sorry, I got distracted by what happened.
Oh yeah.
So,
Was there anything else you wanted to say right now first?
I think that, like I said, the problem that we have is that, this is why I think it's really, really important for us to have someone like you on the CSM, and why somebody would want to vote for you, is because the lore and the universe itself has a way of engaging with the people, and that CCP hasn't really tapped into successfully very much in the past, and they're not that far away from being able to get there. They're like one more world news or a link. Like, let's finally stop messing around and figure out a way to put. We figured out how to log off to select character select screen. Maybe we can build the advanced technology of a link to the fiction portal on the launcher. Let's all sit together and pray, guys. We can do it. And that.
Yeah, and in that context, exactly. Like, look at the agency. You have this place that is immediately accessible to every player. Why not put either just a single link to the fiction portal in a lore section there, put a little interactable window there, or if you really want, go into there, you have a short little intro for each of the empires and maybe a couple of the other factions, and
Right.
maybe a little bit of the tech of the world. And then from there, here's the fiction portal. If you're interested in any of this, here's 20 years of stuff to look through. And it feels like such a non-question, of whether or not something like that should be in the game. And coming at it from an outside angle, it's just profoundly weird that there isn't something like that, and that there never has been.
And what I'm concerned about is that there's been a continuous feedback loop between very specific subsections of our community and CCP that has kind of convinced each other that this isn't important stuff. And if nothing else, Invasions taught us all that is 100% wrong, and that we should take it seriously because it is incredibly important, incredibly powerful, and is a big piece of this whole what is Eve puzzle that we just have never gotten right as a game. And I think it's absolutely imperative for us to have people on the CSM that can be the person in the room that says, hey guys, stop saying that this isn't important because people want to care about this stuff. So you're just telling them that they're not allowed to. And that's not a sandbox. So a sandbox also means that we can engage with the NPCs as well. And we need a voice against the voice that would try to speak against that stuff. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why when you signed up, signed up for being on the CSM, it was an incredibly exciting experience for a lot of people. I think you hit number 1 on Reddit for at least a day without doing. You didn't do any memes.
I was very surprised to see that. That felt nice.
I wasn't.
And it makes me think that maybe It makes me think that maybe this is a thing, that it's not a overestimation to say that a lot of people considered these things an important thing and would like to see it maintained.
Look, the value of democracy is to give voice to the people, to prevent. The value of voting is to give voice to the people and to prevent few controlling the narrative when many feel differently. And I really feel like this is one of those cases in which that is true. And I will say, for full disclosure, for whatever, that you're not the only lore candidate, but it is a reason why that this has become such a big issue, and why I feel like it is so important to get somebody voted in that does have that experience. And, I don't think anybody can talk, that's running for CSM can talk about the universe quite to the length that you can. But My point is
Oh,
that
there are many people who can speak about it, I think, just as well, if not better than I can. There's many people within that whole community, and each of us definitely have our areas.
yeah,
I'd say I definitely try to tackle it from the pragmatic game design standpoint as best I can. And
right.
then, of course, my biggest interest in all of it always lies in all the precursor stuff, say, the Triglavians right now, but everything to do with the Drifters, and before that, the Jove, and then all these other secret little bits of the story, which exist. And by the way, there are bits and pieces of, again, this story that's being written for, again, 20 years or so now across different authors' works. There's ways to just piece all of this together in a way that just makes this world feel extremely fulfilling to learn things about, because there's all of this stuff to it that you can find, and it's there. It's not something that has to be created now. It's just a matter of making it something that people can find and draw links between.
Yeah, I
And again,
agree. I
yeah,
feel
it's
like so much
yeah.
work has been done, and there's like 90% of the work is done, and if that 10% brought it home, then it would unlock a whole bunch for a lot of people, and it could be pretty interesting. But without that, the rest of the 90% of the work feels kind of wasted. Um, and and again, here's the thing: there is an active voice speaking against this, right? The old guard feels that we should never do anything involving, the lore characters or working on that, because it should be 100% about player stories. But I will caution you that those are the same people that are now turning to CCP and say, please give us content drivers. You failed to give us content drivers.
Mhm.
And if you want to talk about content drivers, the people who have decided to side with the Triglavians and go to Poshvin, the people who decided to join
It
Eden Com and
provides
defend
a
the world,
thing you're wanting to do. It gives you a
those are
reason to
conflict
do it.
drivers.
Mhm.
Right. So here's the thing. We need to vote in somebody who's able to speak about that, because we can't just allow an echo chamber to exist that tells CCP that the lore isn't important and allow them to continue to make feature after feature that, it's fine to touch a feature and then drift off for a while because features are pretty static. But as soon as you start tying these rewards into it, or these relationships into it, I should say, you are getting, it's risk versus reward, man. The reward for CCP is huge, but the risk of
In
not
the form
following
of
through,
continued passionate player base, yeah.
right? But
The
the
risk of
risk
not
of
following through
alienating
afterward.
that very passionate player base is devastating. So I look very much forward to you being on the for your campaign. Oh, also, I mean, the other thing to note is that, you have that you resonate with the lore candidacy, and therefore, like, it all a lot of people already knew you as that, and therefore you obviously got a lot of momentum just from that. And therefore, if someone is concerned about not being able to get their candidate in, or if they want to help the person, get across the edge, there's a strong argument that that should be you. You have a huge motivation for the, momentum for the lore community. And therefore, the more people that watch this video and make the decision to vote you number one, the more chance that you will be able to push in and become one of those out of place candidates, or like out of block candidates that manage to make it
Yeah,
in.
one of the more scattered representation things that, again, these are all major aspects of the game. But typically most of the CSM is the null sec blocks, but you need representation for, like we always say, like wormhole space, low sec, different advocates for the way things work in perhaps even high sec, people who are very well versed in, say, industry, that sort of thing. And now we have Poshvin too, and this aspect of the game too. Having a diverse selection of people from different walks of the game is a thing that it kind of baffles me isn't more encouraged for the CSM. And just by the nature of allowing players to decide who goes on it, it's a good thing to have the system. But just by virtue of the biggest groups obviously having the most concentrated influence, it just happens this way. So again, like you said, yeah, it's important to try to get people who represent these other facets of this ridiculously complex world into a place where they can provide feedback based on that part of the game.
And just as a final closure, I want to note, because I don't think we really went into this that much, but in addition to all of that, you have given lots of design specs. You did a line of drifter ships. You
Oh yeah,
design
see, mhm.
a Triglavian a world arc, which, for the record, I continue to use as an example of how I would fix part of my solution to Titans.
I think
Because
Maldavius has also made that a part of his platform as well. The idea of, say, world arcs, as CCP has always talked about, mobile beachhead kind of no, beachhead kind of structures.
right,
Having world arcs be not some ridiculously OP capital ship that can blast things to pieces, because that's not even what it is within the context of the invasions. Having it be a forward operating base, or say, consider it a citadel that can actually move between systems, is a fun idea. And I think there's a lot of room to make that something that players could afford and use and do some really interesting things with. And again, this is a element of the universe that already exists being, say, inspiration for a feature that might actually be something that could be good for the game. And like you said,
right,
also the drifter ship line, that sort of thing. To those listening, I'm not only a guy who's in here talking about story elements and things like that. If you look this up, this precursor drifter ship line I wrote forever ago. Essentially, in addition to it being just something I would very much love to see at some point, it was an exercise in understanding the way the numbers and attributes that make this game tick actually work. So if I'm seeing numbers for things, in, say, potential changes or new ships or things that are being done, things that are being changed, things that are being added, I have a very firm grounding in being able to look at that from, an overview standpoint and say, all right, well, how will this affect this part? And these numbers would be like this for this thing.
right,
I
and
understand these things enough to be able to provide input and perhaps valuable feedback on things more than just being out, more than just lore stuff.
right, and
I've
I'm
played the game for a long while. I have a lot of things I've worked within, and while obviously I have a focus in my candidacy, there's a lot of stuff I think I can do here.
I agree, and that's the reason why I'm bringing this up is because unfortunately, we're kind of coming to the end of our official hour window, but the good news is that between your candidacy and checking out your other forum posts like these, you have extensive writing for people to check out, to get into your head, to think about how you design things, to think about what kind of feedback that you could give and creative solutions that you can come up with, and how deeply you've dug into certain things like the story and speculating on things. And who knows, you've probably given CCP better ideas than some of the ones that they had, and they probably stole at least a couple of your ideas at some point.
Well,
So
if anything I've done could help to enrich the stuff that I enjoy about this game that's become, a really major hobby for me, I'd be very proud of that. And yeah, like you're saying, there's other posts I've written. If anyone wants to see something kind of neat and sort of just understand the grounding I have in this and why I say there's so much of this that can kind of be built forward and be drawn from, I wrote a post compiling really just all the lore of the Jove as kind of a group within the game forever ago. And that one is just, again, bringing together things from many, many years apart. And there's just so much to it. And this is just this one faction that obviously has a lot of connections. But putting any of this in one place to see, having this sort of thing be in a place where players can discover it and actually take a deep dive into it, you get so many people who want to know more.
right.
And also, I saw Riggsy's question there. Yeah, how do you feel about your ideas and agendas possibly being off the board completely for for your entire CSM term? How would that impact your drive to say continue? To that, I will say I'm not here trying to say I want CCP to totally go focus on story stuff. Pretty much the role I would like to best play in being a guy who talks about this sort of thing, being on the CSM, would be to help people keep it in mind in, say, developing a feature. Like look at, again, Invasion Chapter 3, this engagement that was entirely unexpected and now, at least in the view of some of the players who engage with it, they feel as if it's been left to rot, that sort of thing. Being able to provide the sort of talking points within the CSM to say, all right, but this is how this large part of the player base will probably react to things, and this is what you have to anticipate. In addition to saying, all right, this is how this story thing could maybe fit into the world, and yeah, this works this way, and that's a good thing, and we can make that connect back to some way older thing and make it all seem like things are working, when you're developing new features. Uh,
And
that's the value I hope to provide. It's not just me saying, I'm going to make them all talk about lore stuff because that's what I want. It's more just to, as is the spirit of my whole campaign, kind of champion the concept of making this game a thing that is integrated really between its players' actions and a very living world. You know, Eve used to be described during CCP Siegel's term as the, what was it, executive producer, as the largest living work of science fiction. And that is a line that I absolutely love, and it pains me to see it not being used so much now. But that's really what Eve is, and that's the sort of thing that I hope to speak up enough about, or at least mention often enough, for it to be kept in mind. And that's the thing.
Right.
And Ash, may I post a link in the chat? Is that a thing I'd
Sure.
be able to do?
Absolutely. You should be able to. Let's find out.
All right, let me try. Yeah, here is that.
I have a new bot. It might be mean.
Yeah, we'll see what
Looks
happens.
fine.
Yeah, so that post that I have just posted in the chat is the lore of the Jove, that post I talked about. Just look at that, and you can click on my character's portrait there and go to my profile and see any of the other posts that I have made on the forums, including my CSM post.
Okay.
You can see the sort of things I've thrown together and just kind of been trying to elevate as a topic of discussion during the time I've been playing the game. And you'll be able to see a bit of what I'm going for here. And perhaps if you're reading some of the lore posts, you might find yourself a bit more interested in some of it than you were before. So
So
that's the part of things.
make sure to give me that link so that way I can add it to your YouTube video, and
Oh yes, yeah.
we'll probably wrap up the formal thing, and then you can actually stay and talk for a little bit in the meantime. But I wanted to reinforce one last point, which is that it may seem counterintuitive that we need an advocate for the universe to the game developers that make that universe, but this is the world we find ourselves in. It's always been kind of a niche thing. In the last year, it's taken the limelight, and it is proven that it is both incredibly powerful tool and incredibly dangerous to get wrong, even in potentially small ways. And so to that end, we need an advocate in there in the CSM room that's able to say like, hey guys, but also, Delegate Zero keeps things reined in pretty good, but ultimately, like, having people in that design rooms, and more importantly, continually telling CCP, hey, what about these guys? Where's the follow up for this? What's going on with that? These people feel totally left out. Getting people feedback, lack of communication, lack of being able to exchange between CCP and these communities. Devs have kind of stepped in there, but not having a CSM in that is passionate about that community has made us suffer. All of us suffer. So thank you so much for running, and I wish you the best of luck, my friend.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on. It is genuinely very nice to talk, and I'm hoping to do a bit more of this. Like I said, I'll try to get on the Eve Universe stream more often just so we can chat about things.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, of course.
There's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, of course. Also, just before I leave, I think I mentioned this the first time before the technical glitch, but in case you haven't noticed, Uriel and I are friends, and that's my conflict of interest announcement for you guys. And but until next time, guys, thank you for coming, Uriel. Thank you guys for watching 07.